I am the body snatcher. You know we love tummy tucks on this show. Welcome back to Boxing.
Welcome back, loyal fight fans, to another round of boxing. Forgive my voice. Your boy is a little sick today, and that will be the only reason that this episode is only just a little bit short of enthusiasm, as we're going to cover a stunning victory by Devin Haney over George Kambosos. We're going to cover the Stephen Fulton Jr. victory. We're going to touch on the whole Morrell victory. We're going to preview the Naoya Inoue Nonito Donaire fight, which will take place, as I did not expect and read the time wrong. It's not starting at 2:30 in the afternoon here on the West Coast. It's going to be 4:30 in the morning. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys right now, I'm definitely not going to do the first live little fight companion / fight reaction to that. We're going to go ahead and skip that, being as I'm sick as shit, and that's crazy early in the morning. And we're going to talk about Edgar Berlanga today, who will be taking on Angulo on Saturday. We got a lot to get to. So, we're going to shout myself out for being on a roll with the picks. Not just winners, but how they'd win. Decisions and stoppages all mixed in there. Let's start with Devin Haney. So Devin Haney defeats George Kambosos by unanimous decision in Australia without American judges there. They still gave Kambosos 4 rounds in that fight. So when I was watching the fight, I was telling all my friends, just watch out though, because and they're asking me, who do you think won this round and whatnot? What could it be? And I mean, they can see for themselves, and anybody with eyes could see that Devin Haney was running away with that fight. But they said, what could it be? I said, best case scenario, George got 2 rounds here. But that was already like the fight wasn't over yet. And I was telling them, in this last 3 rounds, or even the last 2 rounds, as he'd only definitely won the second round, you could throw in one more round for the guy. I was telling them, watch out, because these judges are going to basically look for any excuse that they can to give this thing a draw or to give it to Kambosos, as he is the Australian hero over there, and all the cards were on his side of the table, so to speak. So, and that's kind of what happened here. So he didn't take those last rounds, and so thank God it was fair enough. But they were giving him 4 rounds anyway, and lo and behold, if he took those last 2 rounds, that's a draw, or maybe one of the judges flips it over to for Kambosos. That fight wasn't close. It wasn't close at all. Devin Haney absolutely picked apart George Kambosos. And a matter of fact, I'll be generous and say that Kambosos maybe could have took 2 rounds out of the 12 rounds. He only definitely won the second round, and in the beginning of the fight, as he lost the first round, most likely, it's not a ton of activity, but he's getting jabbed to death in that first round already. Being picked apart because he keeps his hands down, and he's just got his, he's leading out with his hands down and leaning over his lead foot and his knee, so he's just totally exposed for it. But the second round, that's only the second round, super early in the fight, and Kambosos had a good round there and clipped Devin Haney in that second round. But so it made it exciting in the moment, but then right away it was boom, right out of that again. Third round starting the whole fight on really. Devin just took back control, and in hindsight, after the fact, the only reason that he even won that second round, like the only reason he was even able to land on Devin Haney in that second round is because I think you can clearly, this is really my opinion. I think Devin Haney was looking to impress even more so and maybe try to stop George. And I think he felt he could have his way with him, which he did. So I think he put his foot on the pedal there early in that second round, tried to come to George Kambosos, who for some reason beyond me was trying to box with Devin Haney. Instead of making it a dogfight and getting on the inside and whatnot. But yeah, that the only reason he even won that second round is because Devin Haney brought the action to Kambosos, who can counterpunch a bit, you know. But then he found out, okay, wait, that's not good, or at least let me not step on the gas right now while it's early. That didn't work out super well for me, and then he just easily took control of the whole fight again, and just for the entirety of the fight. And he controlled the distance. So basically, what's going on here is it's not a kind of a he had some really good head movement in there. Devin Haney did, but it's not a Floyd Mayweather-esque kind of thing. It's not like that. It's not like the ultra slick stuff and just barely making a miss and popping them. Of course he does that and he can counter, you know, but it's a lot of managing distance. I would say that is Devin Haney's greatest strength. Obviously he can box his ass off. Obviously he has an incredible jab. Obviously he's got head movement. He's got footwork, and he's totally defensively sound. Unless he himself, like, people don't that like I said, that second round when he came towards George, he's doing that to himself and has to realize not yet, and let me dial it back. When he got clipped by Linares, that was late in that fight that he was owning Linares for 8 rounds. I think it was the 9th round he got clipped and hurt really bad by Linares. Again, that's because he was having his way with Linares, so he again decided to pick up the pace and bring the fight to Linares, who was looking to counter him like he did. So it's more Devin Haney doing it to himself. Nobody has been able to actually themselves like insert or force offense upon Devin Haney. No one has been able to do that to this day. So if you ever see Devin Haney so far, and he has been hit a few different times, every time it's really he's doing it to himself and has to just kind of learn, let me always stay on the game plan, because he's very good at that. But when he's just owning every round and every minute of fights, I think he feels sometimes like, you know, as is human nature, you know, let me pick up the pace, let me do more, because this is kind of easy for me. And he lets his own guard down, or he brings the offense and lets his hands go a little too much and lets go of that defense. So, I mean, he is just an incredible boxer, but I would say his greatest strength is distance management. He manages the distance well. And so it's not a Floyd Mayweather slick, you know, Guillermo Rigondeaux kind of slip and rip and make a miss kind of thing. It's not. He's got good footwork, but it's not like crazy angle cutting and stuff. It's just that you don't see Devin Haney against the ropes for one, and that's because of distance management. That's because he knows I don't want to be on the ropes, and so therefore he literally has never been on the ropes. I mean, he just doesn't go there. And he controls and he dictates where the fight takes place. And simple things as far as just watching his feet, even when punches, either when they're exchanging or when no punches are being thrown, if he likes a range like this, you know, let's say, and of a certain space, and his opponent takes a step or two forward into that space, he instantly is a step or two back. Instantly, He never will give them not 1 second to do that where he'll try to stand there and he wants his distance, and he will keep that distance. He forces that on people. They cannot do what they want to do to him. They can't even have the range for a little bit. They can't even get a couple of seconds on the inside with him unless he's deciding to be the one breaking the range, and like I just talked about, and stepping forward. He will control that range and keep you at his distance where he can jab you and jab down to the body and make sure he can't get hit. And it looks so very simple. And this is one of the reasons why people have had this criticism of him, even though, not only has he unified every single belt and possibly the most stacked weight class in boxing now, but even before that, he doesn't have the best resume, but he has a very good one even before this fight happened of names that he's defeated. But this is where the criticism comes from, is because people don't understand what he's doing in there. So they look at him and they think, we used to complain about Floyd running away. At least Floyd did some cool shit. Now that we look back, look at that, how slick he was, his head movement, all that stuff we just talked about. And then this guy just looks simple. He's just, a little head movement here and there, but he's just, staying there in a Philly kind of a thing like this. He never really utilizes a shell guard, and he don't like to exchange with people, and he doesn't, he lets his hands go. He scores a lot, but I mean, he had 85 jabs landed in this fight, for God's sakes. So he's just jabbing you to death, but he's not a super powerful puncher at all. So to people, he's not exciting, and that's where the criticism comes from. But they don't understand that it's not, like, they don't understand what's happening. They go, geez, can't somebody just get after him? Because he doesn't look all slick and do all these crazy things. He's just so technically sound. He's just so sound in his fundamentals of boxing that even things just like that range, he just keeps it. He keeps that distance all the time exactly where he wants it, so that the fight never needs to be anything more than let me jab you to death, and you can't get in, you can't land shots on me. And it's just something to behold. It's a good testament to having a great foundation of the fundamentals of boxing and building, your game like almost solely on that. That, okay, I'm not a hard hitter, and then, okay, I can counterpunch, of course, but I'm not like a perfect time and put your lights out counterpuncher. I'm not like the cool, like, I don't do the craziest shit you've ever seen, like some guys with the head movement and doing cool shit and cutting angles like Lomachenko. He doesn't really need that stuff. He just is like owning everybody with the fundamentals of boxing. It's really quite impressive, man. So, congratulations to Devin Haney. And also congratulations to George Kambosos, because no, he didn't. I mean, he lost his fight handedly, but also we won't just lie just because we were inspired by the Lopez win and say, well, he fought his ass off. I thought he didn't have a good game plan for the fight. I wondered the entire time why he was trying to box with Devin Haney. There's also a rematch, like I said, that was already in the clause if he lost, and it's in Australia again, supposedly. So it's just he kind of looked uninspiring in there, and like he didn't try very hard. Now, I think if he did, that Devin Haney'd still win. I think Devin Haney wins this rematch no matter what. But, I will say that George Kambosos, again, he's going to get outboxed all the time. There's nothing that he can do to have any kind of a boxing match skills with Devin Haney. But he's a tough guy. And it's combined with the fact that Devin Haney doesn't hit that hard. I mean, he got hit harder in one round, in the first round with Teofimo Lopez all those times before he finally dropped him, that than he did in the whole fight, combined with Devin Haney. I do believe that, even though he just got owned in there and he lost almost every single round, he wasn't in danger of like getting hurt because he's just, that jab was like landing on him all night. He even got a couple hooks and overhands to connect on Kambosos, and it didn't like wobble him or hurt him at all. So my whole feeling would be go for broke, because you're in there with a fighter that's far superior than you. But the one thing you have going for you is I would totally believe that he can't really be hurt so much. It'd be very hard for him to get hurt by Devin Haney. So I think just take those shots, because you're going to take those shots and you're going to lose on points no matter what. You might as well literally eat. This sounds like caveman stuff, but it's his only even chance. It always was, is just eat some of those shots, because you kind of know that you can, and you'll still lose a lot of these rounds trying, but go forward like a bull, press forward like a bull, swing wide, looping shots that can miss, get countered, and lose rounds, and hopefully something happens. You can hurt Haney once, then you stay on top of him, like white on rice, and try to impose yourself the whole time on Haney and back. So I just think, but yeah, I still think he loses. But shout out to him, not for the performance he had, but for the fact that no one knew the guy's name. Let's be honest, it's not just me, okay? There wasn't a fucking person on earth before the Lopez fight that ever said George Kambosos' name. I'm not sure that George Kambosos had fights here in America before that. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure he didn't even have them here. He never had big state. He beat Lee Selby. It's a split decision. That's a good win, but he never. No one knew him, and then he comes on there and to fight Teofimo Lopez, and people are literally mad about it because it's your typical, Jesus, we already know Lopez gonna run this guy over, and you're making us watch Lopez, who just won the belts off Lomachenko, fight a mandatory that no one ever heard of, a 13 minus 1,300 favorite for Lopez in that fight. It's one of the most enormous upsets that there's been in boxing. It's up there. And he pulled that victory off in a war and a dog fight with a good boxer who hits very hard in Lopez, and he won. And he went from that and a free agent, and everybody is clamoring over getting this guy to their network and putting them against and putting all their people up. Fight Devin Haney, fight Lomachenko, no, fight Tank Davis, please. And going to these fights as a free agent, everybody, he had all the cards. And you don't think that he could have fought any one of those numerous belts mandatory contenders? Of course he could have. But before this, he chose somebody who I think would have been, possibly at least even more dangerous, if not at bare minimum, just as challenging and almost insurmountable of a task to fight Lomachenko. And Lomachenko, God bless him, he's over there fighting in Ukraine, turned down the fight for all these belts when he had it at his doorstep. But that's the guy that George Kambosos was going to fight, Not a mandatory, like the best guys. And then he couldn't get him, and he took Devin Haney. I mean, Lomachenko, Tank Davis, and Devin Haney, in my book, are the best people in that weight class. Okay, and then George Kambosos and Ryan Garcia and a bunch of those guys come after. So he literally sought out the hardest challenge instead of just easily taking a mandatory, which every single, sanctioning body for those belts wants you to do. They always push for it. That's why they have it as a mandatory. You have to pay them money, for every one of those different belts that you hold. The WBO, the WBA, the WBC. You have to pay money to them, and they literally want you and ask you to fight their mandatories. He chose this fight, which was very hard, and so shout out to him for that. I will say that. The lightweight standings, again, with what we're kind of talking about here before we move on, I think if you're going to ask me to matchmake my dream matchups, it's pointless to say who would be next. They want to make the Lomachenko fight because George Kambosos and Devin Haney are going to get a rematch here. That's the next fight, and we already know that. But after that, it's pointless to say. I mean, who knows if Lomachenko's coming back? But that's who they would want it to be. But then you still got Tank Davis, who is now out of Mayweather Promotions and more able to make these fights with these guys. And you got Ryan Garcia, who's floating around out there. If you ask me to matchmake, you also have Lopez, who's supposed to move to 140. But now I haven't been mentioning his name in amongst these other names because I was sure he was moving to 140. He said that, but who knows now? If you ask me to matchmake, I would like to see the winner of this rematch, it will be Devin Haney. Okay, I would like to see Devin Haney versus Lomachenko, because I think Lomachenko's the other guy, man. I think that the two guys you have to pick from for Devin Haney to get all those belts, that would be the best fights, either Tank Davis or Lomachenko. And the one, whoever it is, and I don't care, because those are both epic, incredible fights that I want to see against Devin Haney. If you pick Lomachenko, then put Tank Davis against Teofimo Lopez if he's sticking around. If you pick Tank Davis, then make the rematch of Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez. That would be great as well. And that's like those guys are going to be like your secondary, like who's next up then right after for the belt. And an interesting fight for me would be to see that I think is fair. This is like kind of what the most competitive way to match this division up and what I think is fair. Then I would say do George Kambosos versus Ryan Garcia. I think Ryan Garcia is not as good as Devin Haney, not as good as Lomachenko, not as good as Tank Davis. And that looks to be the case for George Kambosos as well. So I think you put those two guys together and you find out who's the guy that's going to keep clinging on. I think that'd be a great fight. I think the styles of that match up well. So that's kind of how I'd shake out that division. But we finally have a completely undisputed. In my book, man, it has nothing to do with hating on Devin Haney. It's just that the extra belt, and I don't care if it was emailed. It's the original thing that everybody always says anyway. I don't get how people have a problem with this. There's too many, there's too many belts. Like you could argue there's too many of the 4 belts. I actually don't mind having the 4 belts. I mean, maybe just 3, right? That would be better, but I don't even mind that. It's just don't make secondary belts. Don't have 2 guys that have WBC belts in the same weight class. Don't have 2 guys that have WBO belts in the same weight class. So yeah, I'm not at all subject. So he unified them all, but to me it was kind of before that. You have to just kind of not count that stuff. But I first saw this happen, and now we have a completely undisputed, even if you do count that stuff. So that is very impressive, and it's possibly the most stacked weight class in boxing as well. Stephen Fulton Jr., Cool Boy Steph, Scooter, got a million nicknames on him. He also came into the ring with a little rat tail hanging off the back of his head, which was kind of cool. He dispatches of Daniel Roman. Daniel Roman was a world champion just a couple of years ago, you guys. And Daniel Roman was a fucking guy who would dog it out. Daniel Roman's always been a dog and an aggressive guy. and likes to get into those fights, but also he's been criticized a little bit of just like that's always the case at the end for him, but in the beginning as a slow starter, he even came out with the right game plan here against Cool Boy Steph to start off strong right from the get go. It just didn't work out for him. He was made to look normal by Stephen Fulton Jr., who is an incredible talent out of Philadelphia, along with like Jerron Boots Ennis, right? I mean, just those guys training in a gym together. It's like, god damn, dude. You talk about the young guys that are coming up to take over boxing. Let's start with those two. You know, Stephen Fulton Jr. and fucking Jerron Boots Ennis. Just the real deal. So that was a great win, and we called that win end by decision. We called that Devin Haney fight to win by decision. We called the Morrell fight to win by stoppage, and he did that as well. Morrell stopped his opponent. Morrell, real cool kind of Cuban fighter because he's very aggressive for being a Cuban guy. You know, we talked about this in when we touched on this fight before. He's kind of always before him, it would kind of be Yuriorkis Gamboa that would let us. All those guys are so slick. If you are a Cuban boxer, you are fucking defensively sound and slick as shit. Guaranteed. But then the burden of that is that they don't let their hands go much. Yuriorkis Gamboa started to kind of break that trend and break that mold a little bit. This guy takes it to a whole new level. Now you got real trouble because of how sound he is defensively and how much he's letting his hands go and how much power he's got and how athletic and young he is. And this was his 7th pro fight, and now he's 7-0. You know, and he's just building towards a great future. Might end up seeing him in the David Benavidez fight. Who knows? Who knows if Benavidez will get a bigger fight? I think he deserves that. But if he has to fight Morrell, that ain't a bad fucking fight to watch at all, man. And then let's touch on the Inoue versus Donaire too. So the first fight was a fight of the year contender. I did a short on this to already give you my pick. Basically, I think that we get a good. I love both these guys, and my heart kind of rides with Nonito Donaire a little bit because he's older and because of all the things he's been able to accomplish. He's Filipino like Manny Pacquiao, and then also now is, you know, an older guy still accomplishing great things like Manny Pacquiao. There's a lot of resemblances there. And yeah, he's just he's a fantastic talent, and when he's older and he's already a built-in legend like that, and he's the only guy who has given any sort of a fight to Naoya Inoue, who is ranked on most lists as number 3 pound for pound any weight class, right under Canelo and Crawford and whatnot. And Donaire just comes out of nowhere and is the only guy to give this guy a fight. Broke his face early in that fight. But then he got in some trouble later, and you know, the fight went the way it did and didn't get the win. This is a great rematch to have. It's a much needed rematch to have. But also, I do think, and I was going to say, my whole point is, I think that Naoya Inoue could possibly, we could see him stop Nonito Donaire here. So that 4th part of my parlay here with all these guys is Inoue to stop Nonito Donaire. Because we got to be realists here. Even though we love the guy, he's older. And he's not shown to be slow yet. But these guys are at a very small weight class. So even if at Nonito Donaire's age, I think he's right around 40 years old. That's definitely old. Like even fighting 30 pounds up from where they are. So never mind at this smaller weight class, right? That's fucking old. And Naoya Inoue is a pound for pound fighter. I don't know if I agree with ranking him at number 3. I've always felt that way, but he is a pound for pound top 10 for sure, and he is a hell of a talent. And at that small, for those small guys, he hits incredibly fucking hard. And I think that he'll come in absolutely determined, and they're putting this on in Japan for him. And I think that he goes out here to prove a point, because Donaire gave him such a good fight last time, and he knows I could have been better at that. Part of the reason he had trouble and had to overcome it is because he had that orbital bone broken early in the rounds in that first fight, and had to go on and suffer through, lost some more rounds because he was suffering through that, not being able to see properly, even blood in his eyes, everything, to come back and get that. Short of his face getting broken here, I see it being different. I see it being a different fight. I don't think we get a fight of the year kind of thing. It'll be very exciting, and this is, again, if it's just totally one-sided and Inoue gets him the fuck out of there pretty early, it still doesn't. This is a right fight to make a rematch for, and Donaire wanted that more than anything, and he deserves that, more than deserves that. And then last bit is Edgar Berlanga. Edgar Berlanga, is fighting on Saturday, and Edgar Berlanga fighting on Saturday, and he's taking on Saturday. He's taking, I think, the 11th. I forgot to write that one. It's not the 10th. Is Friday. So yeah, the 11th on Saturday, and he's fighting Angulo, and he should win this, man. But so not much time to touch on this. It's just that we got to see him do better, right? He was a first round knockout guy, shattered Tyson's record and Mike Tyson's record and many others with 16 in a row first round knockouts for his pro career. First 16 fights, all 16 fights, round 1 KOs for him. Absolutely shot him out of a cannon. He's got a lot of swagger. He's got all the celebrities that fucking love him. He rolls around with Fat Joe and them. They walk him out. He's got all the chains on. He's a New Yorker, Puerto Rican, and he is a star. He it's rightfully deserved, but you can see how this was worn on him. These have progressively become, like Steve Rolls and stuff, which was, I believe, his last fight, and a couple guys. But yeah, it is a progressive step up, but like so slowly, man. So slowly. Usually we talk about, you're stepping up, and then now we see like, oh, it's harder because you're not fighting, guys that shouldn't be in the ring with you anymore. The challenge gets a little more and a little more. Well, this is a really slow creep, though. So it's disturbing that, if Steve Rolls is surviving the whole time and is even winning some rounds against you, and you were presumed to be that kind of talent, no, man, you shouldn't. It's okay to have problems. It's even okay to take losses, which he hasn't yet, even though it's gotten dicey with these decisions for him. It's okay to take losses even when you're getting the championship fights to contend for the belt, the title eliminator fights against veteran guys that are just really great boxers, and you're young and haven't figured out all the shit they figured out yet. That's normal, and that's okay, and that doesn't mean we throw a guy out, but it's kind of disturbing to see how much problems he's having. And I think that a lot of this is the trainers. He's got a lot of coaches he's got too many coaches around him. They're all telling him different things. It's too many people to listen to for a young guy like that. That's fucking was on top of the world, and now he's got all these voices and criticism, all these things, and he's listening to fucking 20 different coaches in the corner. That's not good, and I know that for sure. That's not like a tape. That's like, you can't tell me different. That's not good. And also, I have always been you do need to learn how to box more, for sure, but that's a progressive build, right? Just like the opponents have been. That should have been progressively worked on slowly over time. Things like, drilling down and perfecting a good jab. You know, things like always keeping your hands up after throwing combinations. Things like not staying there when you're done with your combination, standing there right in front of the little things like that should have been. But they've let this guy just tear people's heads off without seemingly, I don't know, but seemingly without teaching him too much. And now when he had his first fight 3 or 4 fights ago, where he had a little problems there and it went all the way. They're like, oh my God, we got to get more coaches, and we got to teach them how to box and stuff, all of a sudden. And then they're just telling things like, be careful and pump the jab. Man, the guy's super powerful. He's super young and athletic. Let him go in there and take his cracks, If the fight's not working out, you kind of work on some of that stuff. I have a different take on that whole thing with Berlanga. I think it's kind of sad. I think I want to see something good from him out here. I actually want to see him let his hands go and do what he wants to fucking do and be a little aggressive. He's not even at the level of competition that you'd like to see for him to be having trouble yet. I think they're confusing him a little bit. You gotta let the man do his thing. Anything you're gonna teach him, don't have it come from 20 coaches. Have it come from 1, right, or 2 at the most. And make that progressive over fights, not like we're teaching you how to box overnight. And Xander Zayas will be fighting as he usually does on Berlanga cards, so they do the old Puerto Rican showcase. Xander Zayas got a big upside to me. I'm seeing lots of good things out of him. He's a guy that's the opposite of what we just talked about. Now, he did come out as like, oh, very good, amateur, picked up and whatnot. But he's progressively getting better and better as they're trying to give him better competition. He's showing up and getting better performances with the step-ups. So yeah, it'll be fun to watch. And I'm going to try to feel better and enjoy these fights a bit. But I'm glad we got back here. Sorry it's a bit late, but better late than never. Still on the Monday schedule, so that's not too bad. And until next time, loyal fight fans, enjoy the fights, and we'll talk to you later. Hope you're winning some money on your boys' picks.